"You're a monster," she whispered, picking up the pen. Jackson merely smiled, a slow, dark, and dangerously sensual smile. "And you've just become my property." The pen scratched the paper, sealing both their fates. Welcome to Love Above All, Passion and Power Stories. Before we begin, I have a challenge for you. If you enjoy the first few minutes of this story, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. But be warned, this story may be addictive. Emily Harper was sold to the man who vowed to destroy her, but the desire that ignited between them, a forbidden flame on the verge of erupting, could ruin everything. Are you ready to lose yourself in a story where hatred kisses passion and no one comes out unscathed? Let's begin. The sound of the clock ticked like a hammer with each passing second. Emily Harper's heart pounded in her throat as she stared at the contract on the solid oak desk. The office was cold, grand, and filled with the scent of leather and power, and sitting on the other side, eyes of steel locked onto her, was Jackson Cole, the man who had just bought her freedom and her fate. "Sign it, Emily." His voice was low, slow, with the commanding tone of a man used to being obeyed. "Or your father goes to prison tomorrow." She clenched her fists, trying to stop her hands from trembling. Her blue eyes were wet, but she wouldn't let him see her cry. Not him. "This is extortion," she whispered. Jackson raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. His black suit clung to him like an armor of domination. His chiseled face and perfectly trimmed beard looked as if carved from stone. "Call it what you want, but it was your father who signed those loans. He's the one who gambled the ranch on the wrong hand. I'm just adjusting the consequences." She knew. She knew Jackson Cole had waited for this moment for years. Ever since her father humiliated him in front of the entire town, back when he was just a poor boy working the fields. Now, that boy had returned as a tycoon, a Texas oil billionaire who owned half of Dallas, and she, the daughter of the man who humiliated him, was the final piece of his revenge. "1 year?" Emily asked, her voice cracking. "1 year, as my wife, in public perfect, at home obedient." Her blood boiled. She wanted to scream, run, slap him. But then she thought of her father, weak, too proud to beg for forgiveness, and of her mother, buried behind the church in a grave marked only by a wooden cross and wilted flowers. "You're a monster," she whispered, picking up the pen. Jackson just smiled, a slow, dark, dangerously sensual smile. "And you've just become my property." The pen scratched the paper, sealing both their fates. Jackson's mansion was isolated, grand, and as cold as its owner. As she entered, Emily felt small, like a prisoner being taken to the enemy's castle. He walked ahead in silence, his firm steps echoing on the marble floor. "You'll sleep in the room next to mine," he said without looking back. "The door locks from the inside. I'm the only one with the key." Emily stopped. Her heart raced. "That's imprisonment." He turned slowly, his eyes burning with something she couldn't name. "It's marriage, and you agreed to every word." His eyes dropped to her body, undressing her without touching her. "If I wanted to, you'd be in my bed tonight." Her face flushed, her lips parted in a mix of rage and something else, something shameful, desire. "But I won't," he added, stepping closer. "Not yet." Emily stepped back, but he followed until her back hit the wall. His body radiated heat and strength, and those grey eyes locked onto hers. "Do you hate me, Emily?" he murmured, his voice laced with provocation. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Because in that moment, between fear and fury, there was something else, something that made her feel alive, drawn, lost. "Because I hate everything you stand for," he said, his breath hot against her skin, "and yet I'm dying to taste your mouth. Before she could respond, he stepped back, leaving her breathless and trembling. She knew this was only the beginning, and that surviving this year would take more than enduring his arrogance. It meant resisting the forbidden desire growing between them like wildfire, ready to devour everything. And when she closed the bedroom door, shaking, she heard the key turn on the other side and knew there was no turning back. The sound of the key turning echoed in Emily's ears like a sentence being passed. She was locked in. Yes, in a luxurious room with silk curtains, a king-size bed, and a view of the golden Texas fields, but still a prison. She slowly walked to the window. Outside, the night was falling, painting the sky in reds and purples, the same colors as the fire burning in her chest since Jackson cornered her in the hallway. The way his eyes invaded her, like every inch of her body already belonged to him, still made her tremble. Emily sat on the bed, trying to steady her breath. The simple dress she wore clung to her skin like a reminder of everything she had lost, her freedom, her pride, the carefree youth she once had. Now she was the contract-bound wife of a man who claimed to hate her, but who desired her with dangerous intensity. Hours later, a soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Before she could answer, the door opened. Him, Jackson Cole, entered like a controlled storm, flawless, confident, intense. He wore a black button-up shirt with the collar open, revealing golden skin and a discreet silver chain. "Just making sure you're settled," he said, closing the door behind him. Emily stood up instantly. "Locking the door from the outside is your idea of hospitality." "It's my idea of control," he said without the slightest hint of apology. "And I like things under control." She crossed her arms, trying to hide her nerves. But Jackson saw everything, the subtle tremor in her fingers, the way she breathed faster as he got closer. "What do you want now?" she whispered. He stepped forward, then again. He stopped so close she could smell his woody, masculine, dominating scent. "I want to make some things clear," he said, voice deep and tense. "For this year, you'll be my wife. You'll dine by my side, smile for the cameras, call me husband. In return, your father stays free, and your family eats." She clenched her jaw, pride throbbing inside her. "You think you can buy me with threats and promises?" Jackson tilted his head, eyes locked on hers. "I already bought you. Remember your signature?" Emily raised her hand and slapped him. The sharp sound echoed through the room like thunder. He didn't flinch, just stood there staring at her. Then a slow, wicked smile spread across his lips. "I like it when you fight," he murmured, stepping closer. She backed away, but he grabbed her wrists firmly, not hurting her, just enough to show who was in control. "Let me go," she shouted. "Are you afraid of me, Emily?" His eyes burned like coals. "I'm disgusted by you. Liar." He pulled her closer, their lips nearly touching. "You feel it too. This," he brushed his nose against hers without kissing, "is what scares you, the fire." Emily's whole body shuddered, her heart pounded. She should hate him, and she did. But why that heat in her bones, that chill down her spine? Jackson let go, as if testing her limits. "Put something decent on. Dinner is in 30 minutes, and smile, wife." He turned and left, leaving the door open behind him. Emily stood there, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Half an hour later, she came down the stairs, wearing a dress she found in the closet, a deep burgundy gown, elegant, far too tight. It was obvious Jackson had arranged those clothes. Clothes to mold her into his taste. As she entered the dining room, she saw him seated at the head of the massive table. He watched her with open hunger. Emily blushed, but kept her head high. "You look stunning," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "Almost makes me forget you hate me." "And you keep reminding me," she shot back, sitting without thanking him. He smiled, pouring wine into both glasses. "To our marriage." He raised his glass. Emily stared at him, fingers trembling around her glass. She knew she was entering a dangerous game, but the question that haunted her most wasn't whether she'd come out of this hole, it was whether she'd resist the man who wanted her burning. And when Jackson's eyes met hers over the rim of his wineglass, Emily knew that toast was the beginning of her surrender. Emily held the wineglass like a weapon. The cold crystal trembled slightly between her fingers, and even though she tried to keep a proud posture, she knew Jackson could see right through her. He read her every move with unsettling precision, like a hunter who knew the prey's rhythm before it even ran. "Aren't you going to toast?" he teased, his gaze firm, challenging. She raised her glass and lightly touched his. "To our marriage," she muttered bitterly. "May it be short and end quickly." Jackson smiled, that half-smile that wasn't kind or charming. It was dangerous, a warning. "Don't be so pessimistic, wife. We have a whole year to get to know each other, intimately." Emily looked away, but not before feeling the heat that word, intimately, sent rushing over her skin. Dinner continued in silence for a few minutes. Sophisticated dishes were served by staff who didn't dare meet their eyes. There was something in the air, something invisible and heavy, hanging over the table like gunpowder smoke waiting to ignite. "Why me?" she finally asked, setting her fork down. "There were other ways to get revenge on my father. Why involve me?" Jackson leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Because he took from me what I loved most," he said, voice firm, without hesitation. "My name, my dignity. You're the payback." Emily swallowed hard. She knew the story. She knew that years ago, her father had fired Jackson publicly, falsely accusing him of theft. And even when the truth came out, the damage had been done. Jackson disappeared for years and returned a billionaire. "So I'm your living humiliation, a decorative punishment." He watched her, but now there was something else in his eyes, a trace of pain. "It's not just that." "Then what is it?" she pushed, defiant. Jackson leaned over the table, eyes locked on hers. "It's that even hating everything about you, I still wanted you, since the first day I saw those contempt-filled eyes in the courtroom." He gave a dark smile. "You were the only one who looked at me like I was nothing, and now you belong to me." Emily's entire body reacted. She wanted to hate him with every fiber of her being. But that unexpected confession, raw, confusing, full of anger and desire, left her defenseless. "And you think desire justifies your tyranny," she said, her voice low, hoarse. "I think desire never asks for permission to be born," he replied. The silence between them grew heavier, a silence thick with tension, repressed attraction, and unspoken words. Later in the bedroom, Emily couldn't sleep. The wine still burned in her throat and Jackson's words echoed in her mind. "Even hating everything about you, I still wanted you." She paced back and forth in a silk nightgown, another one of his gifts. Expensive, beautiful clothes that felt more like well-disguised traps. A strange ache stirred inside her. It wasn't just fear or anger. It was the beginning of something she refused to name. Suddenly, she heard footsteps outside, the key turning again. The door opened slowly, revealing Jackson. Barefoot, hair slightly tousled, as if he couldn't sleep either. "I came to get a book," he said, looking directly at her. Emily stepped back, gripping the edge of the dresser. The nightgown left her legs bare and her shoulders exposed, and Jackson's gaze made no attempt to hide what he saw. "Don't you have books in your own suite?" "I do, but I prefer your presence." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "You're crossing the line." Jackson walked slowly to the bookshelf, grabbed a random book but didn't leave. Instead, he turned to face her, his eyes burning again. "Are you afraid of me?" "I'm afraid of what you're trying to do to me." He stepped closer, stopping inches away, book in one hand, the other in his pocket. "And what am I doing, Emily?" She swallowed hard. "You're breaking me, piece by piece." Jackson was silent for a moment. Then he reached out and touched her face gently with his fingers. No force, just a touch, a human gesture, almost protective. "Maybe because I was broken that way too." She looked into his eyes, and in that second she saw beyond the arrogance, a shadow, an unhealed past, a pain that had shaped the cold man standing before her. And before she knew what she was doing, Emily reached out and placed her hand on his chest. Unsure if it was to push him away or keep herself steady, his chest was warm, solid, and his heart beat strong beneath the shirt. She kept her hand there, frozen, as if the simple contact could disarm everything she felt. She didn't know if she wanted to pull away, or if she was searching for some kind of balance in the silent storm between them. Jackson didn't move. He watched her with dark, focused eyes, like every breath she took was a confession. "Are you afraid of me? Or of yourself?" he asked, his voice low, nearly a whisper. She stared at him, unsure of how to answer. Because the truth was, both fears were eating her alive. Fear of what he could do to her soul, and fear of what her body was already beginning to crave, against all logic. "This shouldn't be happening," she said, voice trembling. "But it is." Jackson stepped closer, pressing his body against hers. The hand holding the book dropped to the floor, forgotten. With the other, he cupped her face, his thumb gently caressing her cheek. "Hate me all you want," he murmured, "but don't lie to yourself." Emily felt the heat rising through her legs, her stomach exploding in her chest. It was as if that touch, that look, that man was undressing her without removing a single piece of clothing. She could feel his breath, the scent of his skin, the tension of the moment. Jackson was there, so close, so ready to break every rule he'd set. But then he stepped back, took one step away, as if battling something inside himself. "Not tonight," he said, looking away. "Not like this." Emily stood frozen, confused, trembling. For a moment she thought he'd kiss her, that he would take her then and there, among books and secrets. But he walked away, and left her with something worse than fear, frustrated desire. Jackson walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob, and murmured without turning, "I told you I was a monster, but I still have a shred of honor." Then he left, locking the door once again. The next morning, Emily woke up more exhausted than when she went to bed. Her dreams had been messy, too hot, flooded with Jackson's presence even in his absence. When she came down for breakfast, she found him on the back porch, a cup of black coffee in hand, and his gaze lost in the Texas horizon. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, without turning. "No," she replied honestly. "Good. Neither did I." She walked over to the table and sat across from him. There was something strange about that moment, a stillness, as if for a few minutes they could pretend they were just husband and wife. No contracts, no revenge, no threats. "You were going to kiss me last night," she said, meeting his eyes. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Did you want me to?" Emily looked away. "I don't know." "Then let's stop pretending." Jackson set his cup down with a soft thud. "You want me, and I want you. But between wanting and taking, there's a line I'm not ready to cross." She looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "Why not?" He was silent. Then, softly, he said, "Because I'm not just a cold tycoon, Emily. I'm a broken man, and if I touch you, for real, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." Emily's stomach twisted. This was more than desire. It was danger. It was surrender. But before she could say anything, a voice cut through the stillness. "Mr. Cole, sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call from the bank. Jackson nodded, rising without looking at her. We'll finish this conversation later. She stayed there alone, staring at her coffee, her heart still racing, her body still buzzing from something that almost happened, but more than anything, his words echoed in her mind. If I touch you, I don't know if I'll be able to stop. Hours later, Emily was walking through the house when she heard voices coming from the office. She recognized Jackson's, but there was another, a woman's voice, soft, sensual, familiar. Curious, she moved closer to the half-open door. "Do you still think about her?" the woman asked. "That's none of your business, Melissa," Jackson snapped. "You think you can bury the past just because you have a trophy wife now?" Emily froze. That woman, who was she? "Emily is no trophy," Jackson replied, his tone making Emily hold her breath. "And if you keep talking about her like that, you're out of here. Are you falling for her?" Melissa teased. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stepped back, heart pounding, and for the first time, she felt something new growing inside her. Jealousy. Emily didn't know if she wanted to run far away from him, or run back and demand he be hers alone. Emily stepped back in silence, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Every word she'd overheard, "Do you still think about her? Are you falling for her?" echoed like a blade twisting inside her mind. And worst of all, Jackson's silence, a silence that spoke louder than any answer. That woman, Melissa. The name stuck like a threat. Emily didn't know who she was, but she knew enough. There was intimacy in that conversation. There was history, and there was resentment. She returned to her room like an automaton, body rigid, thoughts chaotic. For the first time since being forced into this marriage, she felt something different, something that wasn't fear or anger. It was the sharp tip of jealousy piercing slowly through her chest, and it infuriated her, at herself. You can't be falling for him, but it was too late for inner commands. Later that day, Emily walked down the stairs wearing a simple black dress, her hair in a loose bun. She was ready to face the truth, and maybe Melissa. When she entered the main room, she found Jackson on the sofa with a glass of whiskey in his hand and a distant look in his eyes. Beside him sat an elegant blonde woman with green eyes and a sharp smile. Melissa. "What a surprise," Emily said, her voice dripping with sweet venom. Melissa stood as if she were stepping onto a runway. "So you're the wife," she smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I thought you'd be more sophisticated." Emily held her chin high. "And I thought you were no longer part of his storyline." Jackson rose slowly, cautious. He could feel the electric tension between the two women, like a wire ready to snap. "Melissa was just leaving," he said to Emily. "Oh, what a shame," Emily replied with a half-smile. "I was about to ask what really happened between you two." Melissa turned to Jackson, provocative. "Are you going to tell her, or should I?" Jackson stared at her coldly. "I told you not to test my patience." "I was the woman he loved," Melissa fired, looking directly at Emily, "until she showed up with her contract and her helpless little face." She smiled cruelly. "He never got over what happened with me." Emily stood firm, but inside, everything was spinning. "And you? Have you gotten over being left behind?" Melissa turned to leave. No dignity, only fury. "Good luck, darling. You'll need it. He's not built to love, only to destroy." As the door slammed shut, Emily turned to Jackson. "Is it true?" He stared into his whiskey glass as if the entire past lived inside it. "Melissa was part of a life I tried to forget, before I became who I am now, before I lost everything." Emily took a step closer. "Lost what, Jackson?" "A brother," he said, and his voice broke. An accident, and I still blame myself. Her heart tightened. That she didn't expect. I'm sorry. Don't be, he replied, stepping toward her. You want to know who I am, Emily? I'm the man who buried his younger brother with his own hands and vowed never to feel anything that could hurt that much again. But you do feel, she whispered, no matter how hard you fight it. He stopped in front of her, his gaze intense, breath heavy. You're a curse, Emily. I should hate you, use you, discard you. But every time I look at you, everything inside me wants to do the opposite. Emily touched his face, for the first time without fear, without anger, only compassion and desire. Maybe because you're not as broken as you think. Jackson's lips parted in a soft sigh, and then, as if he could no longer resist, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was a burning kiss, desperate, filled with repressed rage and denied desire. His hands roamed her back, his mouth dominated hers with urgency, and she responded with equal intensity, as if that kiss was the only right thing in a chaotic world. When they pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. This should have never happened, he murmured, but it did. And in that moment, neither of them could go back. Emily knew that from that kiss forward, she was no longer just a wife by contract. She was a woman on fire. Emily could still taste him on her lips. A kiss that started as a mistake, ended in surrender. There, in the silent echoes of the luxurious room, she realized she was no longer just a prisoner of the contract. She was a prisoner of desire. And the man who held the key had a name, Jackson Cole. He stepped back first, as if he needed to remind himself who he was. This changes nothing, he said, trying to regain the control that Kiss had stolen. You're still here out of obligation. Emily lifted her chin, her chest rising and falling with every rapid breath. Then why did you kiss me like I belonged to you? Jackson looked at her, his eyes darkened. Because you do. The words hit like thunder between them. There was no denying it. He meant it, and it left her somewhere between fury and fascination. I'm not a thing, she replied, walking toward him with firm steps. I'm not your ranch, or your car, or your trophy. No, he said, closing the distance until their breaths met again. You're worse. You're the fire I lit inside myself, and now I can't put it out. Emily's knees weakened, but she didn't pull away. For the first time, she didn't want to run from this man. She wanted to see where it would lead, even if it burned her to the ground. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Every inch of her skin felt touched, awakened, claimed by Jackson. The room felt too small to hold the storm inside her. She paced back and forth, trying to ignore the constant shiver. But the memory of the kiss, the way he held her face, how his mouth invaded hers, like he wanted to brand her forever, it all made her burn. When the clock struck 3 a.m., she made an unthinkable decision. She opened the door slowly. This time, it wasn't locked. And she walked to Jackson's suite, knocked once, twice. The door opened. There he was, barefoot, shirt unbuttoned, eyes ablaze. Emily? I didn't come to argue, she said, or to beg. I came because I can't pretend anymore. Jackson said nothing. He just pulled her inside and closed the door behind them. The silence between them was loaded with dangerous promises. She touched his chest again, like before. But this time, he didn't hesitate. His hands slid around her waist, up her back, pulling her closer. The kiss came like a storm, no warning, no mercy. A kiss of possession, a kiss that said everything they couldn't put into words. She clung to him like he was the last anchor in the chaos. I should send you away, he whispered against her skin, but it's already too late. Then don't say anything, she begged. Just take me. And that night, There were no contracts, no revenge, no pride, only two bodies trying to heal their wounds, with fire. The sun was already rising when Emily woke in his arms. Jackson was sleeping on his side, hands still resting on her waist, as if afraid she might vanish. She watched him silently, tracing each line of his face with her eyes. He looked younger in sleep, softer, almost human. But the peace didn't last. A violent knock on the door startled them both. Jackson jumped up, pulling on his pants quickly. "What the hell?" He opened the door and found one of the staff, pale and shaken. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry, but the sheriff is here with a warrant." "Warrant?" Emily sat up, tense. "What's happening?" Jackson scowled, irritated. "I'll handle it. Stay here." But she followed him to the hall, where the town sheriff stood, flanked by two officers and a bank lawyer. "Jackson Cole," the sheriff said formally, "you're being served for suspected tax fraud and asset concealment." Emily froze. "This is a mistake," Jackson said firmly. "I have lawyers to deal with this." "You'll need them," said the lawyer, handing over a folder. "We've frozen all your assets, including this property." Emily felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. The man who once seemed invincible was now falling, and she didn't know whether to stand and fight beside him, or accept that she was just another disposable piece in his collapsing empire. And as the sheriff walked away, Emily looked at Jackson and realized that maybe, for the first time, he was the one who needed saving. The door shut with a sharp click. The sound echoed through the mansion like muffled thunder, sealing the very thing Jackson feared most, the fall. Emily stood frozen in the hallway, arms crossed, body tense. She watched the man who, until yesterday, had seemed invincible. Jackson Cole stood motionless, staring at the documents in his hands as if he could will them out of existence. "Tell me this is a setup," she whispered. He took a deep breath, his steel-grey eyes now dark and devastated. "They've been planning this for months," he said, gripping the folder. "They manipulated numbers, created gaps, and used my name. They made it look like it was me." "Who would do that?" He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression was tightly controlled fury. "Someone who wants me ruined, someone with access to what's mine." Emily swallowed hard. She thought of Melissa, of all the people Jackson had pushed through to get where he was. Being hated by half the city was the price of power. But now, that price had come due. "What does this mean?" she asked. "Are we going to be evicted?" "Not yet. But soon, yes." She stepped closer to him, and for the first time saw Jackson vulnerable. No suit. No armor, just the man behind the tycoon. "You still have something they can't freeze," she said, steady. "What?" "Me." Jackson looked at her, as if those words were spoken in a language he couldn't translate. "Emily, I know what I am to you, the contract, the symbol of your revenge. But I'm not just that, and you're not just the man who bought me." He ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. "You should leave, before this gets worse, before I go down and drag you with me." She stepped forward, defiant. "I was sold to you, Jackson. I was humiliated, locked up, used. And still, I'm here, not out of duty, but by choice." He looked at her, pained, but there was also a flicker of something he seemed desperate to suppress. "Why are you doing this?" "Because last night you looked at me like no one ever has, like I was more than an obligation." She touched his chest. "Because you made me feel alive, desired, and now I want to give that back. I want to fight beside you." Jackson pulled her to him tightly. The kiss that followed was a plea for forgiveness, a silent cry for salvation. But the moment was broken by a rushed knock on the door. Jackson's personal lawyer entered, pale. "We need to act fast. The press already knows they're going to turn this into a circus." "Let them come," Jackson said, his voice regaining its edge. "But first, I want you to investigate someone." "Who?" "Melissa, and any movement she's made in the past few weeks." Emily didn't react with surprise. Deep down, she already knew. That woman hadn't returned out of nostalgia. She had come back to destroy. Hours later, the first reporters were already at the gates. Luxury cars left the property, followed by curious stares and camera flashes. Emily watched from the balcony, her hair loose in the wind, her expression unwavering. Jackson entered without a word and stood beside her. "Ready to play the betrayed wife of a crumbling empire?" he asked. She turned to him. "I'm ready to be the woman who helped that empire rise again." Pause. "But only if you let me." Jackson looked at her for a long moment, as if finally seeing the truth behind her strength. Emily was no longer the bankrupt farmer's daughter. She wasn't a paper wife. She was an ally, a dangerous woman. "Then let's play this game together," he said, offering his hand. She took it without hesitation. The next morning, the two appeared before the cameras, hand in hand. Emily wore a white dress, simple but commanding, her face calm, posture proud. Jackson stood firm beside her, even knowing the headlines would call him a fraud, a criminal. But she was there, by his side, and that changed everything. "Do you have anything to say about the charges?" a reporter shouted. Jackson looked at Emily before answering. "I do, and it won't be an apology." He stepped up to the mic. "Someone tried to destroy me, but I'm still standing, and I'm not alone. This woman," he pointed to Emily, "is the only reason I'm still fighting." Emily felt her eyes fill with tears, not because of the words, but because for the first time he saw her, not as a possession, but as salvation. And when he squeezed her hand in front of everyone, Emily knew she was now the one holding Jackson Cole by the soul. The crowd applauded, but all Emily could hear was her own heartbeat. Jackson's words echoed in her mind. "This woman is the only reason I'm still fighting." And in that moment, she knew everything had changed. She was no longer a side character in her own life. She was part of the game, and maybe part of his heart. Jackson squeezed her hand again before they stepped away from the cameras. Once the mansion doors closed behind them, he looked at her in silence. For a moment, he looked like a man without armor, just flesh, blood, and uncertainty. "You didn't have to stay," he said, "and yet I did. That scares me more than the scandal." Emily gave a bitter smile. "Love is always more dangerous than falling, Jackson, because love can't be controlled." He looked away as if her words were too heavy to bear. "Don't say love, not now. Then say it yourself." But he said nothing, and that silence hurt more than any lie. As night fell over Dallas, Jackson's lawyer returned with news. There were suspicious transactions linked to one of the shell accounts involved in the fraud, and Melissa's name appeared in intercepted calls with a former company accountant. "She started getting close again when she heard about the audit," the lawyer explained, "and apparently she had a very specific plan." Jackson listened in silence. Emily sat beside him, their fingers intertwined beneath the table. He didn't speak, but the way he held her hand showed just how much it was keeping him grounded. "She tried to destroy me out of revenge," he finally said. "Because once I chose the company over her, and now she wants me to pay for that." Emily swallowed hard. "And you? Do you still feel anything for her?" Jackson looked her deep in the eyes. "After you, Melissa feels like nothing but a dirty memory." Emily nodded, even knowing that old feelings never fully die. But what truly mattered now was what was growing between them, and that was far too alive to ignore. The next morning, Emily walked through the mansion's garden, her thoughts tangled. The scandal, the kiss, the touch, the trust, it all spun inside her like a storm. When she heard footsteps behind her, She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You're no longer locked in here," Jackson said, stopping beside her. "And yet I'm still here," she replied, returning the same words he had used the night before. He smiled, a small smile, but a real one. "I've never had anyone stay for me, only for what I could offer." Emily turned to him. "And what are you offering now, Jackson?" "Everything, or nothing." Pause. "All I know is, if you leave now, I won't ever be the man I used to be again." She stared at him in silence. Then, in a gesture that was equal parts surrender and courage, she touched his face. "Then tell me who you really are. No contracts, no revenge, no masks." He took her hand, closing his eyes for a moment. "I'm a man who lost everything trying to be invincible, who built an empire out of pain, and who's now on his knees before a woman he never expected to love." Emily felt her chest tighten. "Then love me, Jackson, but love me the right way." "The right way scares me." "It scares me too. But still, I'm here." They moved toward each other slowly, as if afraid to break something sacred. When their lips met, it was different. There was no battle, no domination, only surrender. A calm kiss, deep, needed. Later, as they returned to the house, they found an envelope left at the door. Jackson opened it and his face hardened. "What is it?" Emily asked, feeling the blood drain from her face. He turned the paper to her. It was a photo. Emily, naked, asleep, in his bed. "This was taken the night you came to me," he said, tense. Emily brought a trembling hand to her mouth. "Someone was inside the house. Someone wants to destroy us. And it's not just about money anymore. It's personal." Her stomach churned. "Is this blackmail?" "It's war, and we're at the center of it." Emily stared at the photo, her eyes brimming. Her privacy stolen, her intimacy violated. But instead of retreating, she looked at Jackson with resolve. "Then let's fight. Together." Jackson nodded, eyes burning with rage and protectiveness. "They want to use you against me, but they have no idea. You're my greatest strength now." And as the photo burned in the fireplace, Emily knew their love was under attack. But the fire between them was stronger than any threat. The paper burned slowly in the fireplace, turning the threat into ashes, but the damage had been done. Emily could still taste the bitterness of the violation. Someone had been there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and now it wasn't just Jackson in danger, she was a target too. "I should have seen this coming," Jackson growled, pacing like a cornered animal. "I should have tightened security, checked every inch of this house." "You didn't expect a war inside your own home," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady even as she trembled inside. "I expect everything now." Emily stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "And what if it's too late, Jackson? What if this scandal, this photo, is used against me, against us?" "They won't touch you," he answered, eyes blazing. "I swear it." But promises didn't erase fear, nor the sense that something far bigger was coming. That night, Emily did the unthinkable. She waited for Jackson to fall asleep, waited until the footsteps in the halls faded. Then she packed a small bag. She loved him. She knew that now, with painful clarity. But she also knew that if she stayed, she would be used to destroy him, and she couldn't watch him fall because of her. She wrote a short letter. Every word felt like a knife. "I love you, but I need to go. For you. For us. I can't be your weakness. I hope someday you understand." She left the letter on his pillow, and left in the silence of dawn, her heart shattered in her chest. Jackson woke at 5 in the morning. The room was cold, empty. He knew before even seeing the letter. He knew because his chest felt hollow. When he picked up the note, his hands trembled. The words hit like bullets. I need to go. For you. No, he murmured, letting the letter fall. He ran through the house like a madman, flinging open doors, calling her name, but Emily was already gone, and with her went everything still human inside him. Emily boarded a bus, headed for the countryside, a place where no one knew her, a small town in Tennessee, where an old college friend offered her shelter. There she traded silk dresses for worn jeans, heels for dusty boots, and her name for anonymity. But every night was torture. She'd close her eyes and see Jackson, feel his touch, hear his voice, and wonder every morning if he hated her for leaving, or if he understood. Until 2 weeks later, she saw the headline on a diner TV. Fallen tycoon vows revenge against those behind fraud and invasion. Jackson Cole, they took everything, except what really matters. And Emily touched the screen, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. He still loves me, but she didn't know if she had the strength to go back. In Dallas, Jackson didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He barely breathed. He had lost companies, credibility. But nothing hurt more than losing her. Emily. He searched for her, hired investigators, turned every stone in the state, until one night the phone rang. "Mr. Cole," the detective said, "we found her." Then, 2 days later, Jackson stepped out of a rented pickup in front of a modest house in Tennessee. He was thinner, his eyes marked by sleepless nights, but determined. He knocked once, twice. Emily opened the door with her heart pounding and froze. Jackson, there, in front of her, like a storm in human form. "Why did you run from me?" he asked, no hesitation. She swallowed hard, trying to steady the whirlwind inside. "Because I love you, and I thought it was the right thing to do." "The right thing would have been staying," he stepped forward. "You're not my weakness, Emily. You're my strength. You've made me more of a man than all the money I ever had. But don't interrupt me." He took her face in his hands, firm. "I searched everywhere. I screamed your name reading that letter. I'm here because I don't care about empires, scandals, or revenge anymore. I only care about you." Emily's knees buckled. "And if it's still dangerous? Then let the world fall. But let it fall with you in my arms." Before she could answer, Jackson kissed her. A kiss of reunion, of forgiveness, of promise. There, on the porch of that forgotten house, two broken hearts found each other again. But the past wasn't done with them yet. As he held her like he'd never let go again, Emily knew the final battle was just beginning. Jackson held Emily like she was the only real thing left in a collapsing world. And maybe she was. On the porch of that modest home, in a forgotten corner of Tennessee, two hearts scarred by pain found something greater than pride, revenge, or contracts. Redemption. "I didn't come for you on impulse, Emily," he whispered, resting his forehead against hers. "I came because I realized, if you're not with me, I'm no one." Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to say so much, but words failed in the face of such raw truth. All she could do was nod slowly as his fingers gently caressed her face, with a tenderness she never thought possible from the once cold, ruthless magnate. "I love you," she finally said, voice trembling. "Even when I left, even when I thought it was over, I never stopped loving you." Jackson smiled, but there was sorrow in his eyes. "Then come home with me." "Our home?" "The one that's left in me. Because the rest, Emily, they destroyed. But my love for you? No one can touch that." Back in Dallas, the battlefield remained. Media, lawyers, lawsuits. But Jackson was different, stronger, calmer. As if, in finding Emily again, he'd also reclaimed his soul. She stood beside him every step, every meeting, every interview. Together, they rebuilt more than a reputation. They rebuilt an unbreakable bond. Then, On a grey morning, their lawyer walked in holding a folder, his expression tight. "We have enough evidence," he said. "Melissa not only orchestrated the fraud with the former accountant, she also had hidden cameras installed in the property." Emily's stomach turned. She filmed us?" "Yes. The photo used in the blackmail was taken by one of those cameras." He placed the documents on the table. "We have everything, enough to arrest her." Jackson closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was a new fire inside, the fire of justice. "Take it to the DA. I want her to pay for every second she made us suffer." The following week, Melissa was arrested while trying to leave the country. The evidence was irrefutable. The media exploded, headlines on every screen, Tycoon's ex-lover involved in corporate destruction scheme. And for the first time in months, Jackson and Emily could breathe. The war was over, and they had won. On the mansion's porch, now quieter, more intimate, Emily watched the sunset. The same sky that had once felt like a prison now symbolized freedom. Jackson stepped up behind her, wrapping her in his arms. He kissed the back of her neck and murmured, "Do you remember the first night you slept here?" She smiled. "I remember feeling like a prisoner." "And now?" She turned to him, eyes full of tenderness. "Now, I feel like the queen of this empire." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a simple ring. No extravagance, just a blue stone that reflected the sky above them. "I bought this the day I realized I loved you." Pause. "I don't want you as my contract wife anymore. I want you as my wife by love, for life." Emily brought her hand to her mouth. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. "Jackson, marry me again, Emily. No clauses, no expiration dates, just us, against the world if we have to." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." 2 months later, they remarried in a small ceremony in front of the house where it all began. This time, there was no contract, no bargaining, only two souls who found each other in the middle of chaos and chose to stay. Emily wore a light, flowing dress, and Jackson a suit without a tie, buttons undone, showing he had left the armor behind. Both smiled like people who had walked through fire and come out stronger. And when he kissed her, every ghost vanished. Only love remained. Fierce, eternal. And as he carried her in his arms with the sun bathing them both, Emily knew sometimes love is born from chaos, but it blooms in the warmth of a soul brave enough not to give up. 3 years later, the Cole mansion was no longer a symbol of solitude and revenge. It was a home. Emily walked barefoot through the garden, wearing a flowing white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. In her arms, a little girl with grey eyes and an easy smile babbled nonsense while playing with strands of her mother's hair. "Easy, Lily," Emily said, laughing. "Mommy's not a jungle gym." Lily had her father's piercing gaze, and his intensity, like she already knew she was born of the fire of two hearts that dared to love against all odds. From the other side of the garden, Jackson watched them with a soft smile. He no longer wore crisp suits every day. Now he preferred rolled-up shirts and a bit of scruff on his face. The tycoon once feared by half the world was now a devoted father, a redeemed man. He walked over, scooping Lily into his arms and spinning her through the air. The little girl squealed with laughter, and Emily felt her chest fill with a peace so deep it almost hurt. "This is my favorite time of day," he said, looking at his wife, "when I look at the two of you and remember it was all worth it." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "Even the forced contract, especially that, because the trap I set ended up saving me. And the prison turned into a home," she added, smiling. Inside, the fireplace still burned, a symbol of the fire that had united them since the first kiss, a fire that would never die, because some stories begin with pain, others with desire, but the most powerful ones are born from both. And there, under the golden Texas sky, Emily and Jackson knew they weren't perfect, but together they were unstoppable. Thank you for coming here and watching my story. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more stories like this one. And don't forget to leave a like. Your support helps our channel grow and reach more people who love emotional, passionate tales just like you. The next story is already on your screen, full of drama and passion that will stir your emotions and keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay with me and let's dive into this new journey together. See you soon, my dear friends. Catch you in the next video.